Welcome to another episode of Two Old Geeks Talking. Now on the World Wide Web.
Hey, welcome back to Two Old Geeks Talking. I'm Rob.
And I am Trace.
And today we're discussing
we're going to talk about the X-Men.
the X-Men.
So we're going to talk about the movies, and we're going to talk about the animated series. And, of course, you can't do that without talking about the comics.
Right.
So we'll start. X-Men started in the 1960s, 1963 to be exact. It was made by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. So Stan, the man Lee, he got tired of, well, first of all, he'd already had success with the Avengers.
Right.
The Avengers was a team that was made up of known heroes. So, Iron Man was already in the comics, Hulk was already in the comics, Captain America was already in the comics, Iron Man already had his comic. And so with the X-Men, whenever he created that team, it was a bunch of no-names.
Right.
You never had heard of them. And it really wasn't that popular, to be honest with you, when it started out. Stan, he got tired of coming up with origin stories for all these heroes. So, Spider-Man got bit by a radioactive spider.
Right.
Hulk, it was gamma rays. Fantastic Four, they built their own spaceship and went into space, got hit by cosmic rays. And Daredevil got hit in the eye with a radioactive isotope.
It didn't seem like he had that much trouble.
So with this new bunch of characters, he didn't want to have to try to come up with new origin stories for all of them. So he came up with the idea of mutants. And at one time, that's what the comic was going to be called, mutants. But they changed their mind. But in the X-Men, they called it X-Men because of Professor X. But in the X-Men, at a certain age, typically puberty, sometimes younger, you have an extra chromosome, and so you develop powers. It may affect your appearance, it may not, but you gain powers. So these people were called mutants.
Right.
And so they were feared and sometimes hated by us normal humans. And so that was the premise of the original comic. Do you remember the original team? Can you name them all?
Of course, Beastman, Cyclops, Angel. Did I already mention the Frost guy who looked like a snowman? Iceman, but he looked like a snowman back in the day.
Yeah.
And there was one other male character, but I can't remember his.
There's a female character. The female character, Miss Marvel.
Okay, Miss Marvel, which is basically Jean, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Okay.
But at first she was Miss Marvel. And so then you had Professor X. So that rounded out the team. Like I said, it wasn't successful. Kids didn't buy the comic. Stan eventually left, and Roy Thomas and Neil Adams took over, and the stories got better. But those 1960 comics, which aren't bad reads,
right,
but just in comparison to the rest of the X-Men run, they are. And it's an unpopular opinion, but it's mine. Stan was a great idea man. So when it come to like being creative and coming up with ideas, he was great. When it come to writing, Stan's writing, in my opinion, and everybody has their opinion.
You say he was a good ideal man, but it sounded like everything was radiated.
well, I mean, Marvel was actually called the House of Ideas at the time. But Stan's writing in the 1960s, I'm going back and rereading a lot of those 1960 comics, and they're not the best. But the writing did get a little better at issue 55, and that leads us into the 70s. Well, in the 70s, the comic got canceled, pretty much. What happened from 70 to 75, they still had X-Men comics every month, but all they did was reprint the comics from the 1960s with new covers. And so that's how bad it was.
So these ones I have that's from like 73 are just reprints?
They more than likely are, yes, with new covers.
Okay. Well, I'll give you that because Iceman actually looks like Iceman.
Yeah. So, but what happened was in 1975, Giant X-Men 1 come out. And that changed everything. So Stan Lee thought it would be a good idea to have a team made up of people from different countries. So he had a new group of mutants and kind of done away with the old group. So you had Colossus, who was from
Russia.
Russia, right? You got it. Storm, who was from
Louisiana.
no, she was from Africa. Storm.
Oh,
Storm.
I thought you said Rogue.
No, Storm.
Oh, yeah.
Wolverine was from
Originally, they made him Australia, but then oh no, that was a cartoon.
Yeah.
Canada,
Canada, right? So what about Nightcrawler?
Germany.
Yes, you got that right. A lot of people mess it up and say France.
Oh,
For some reason, I don't know. Does he look French? He doesn't.
No.
Yeah, I don't think so. But anyway, so you had Thunderbird, who was
I don't remember Thunderbird.
yeah he died. But spoiler alert from 1970s. But he was a Native American character.
Oh, I do. I think I do remember.
Yeah.
him.
So the comic was really popular, and they turned it over. They turned the writing over to a new intern who had turned writer named Chris Claremont. The impact he had on X-Men is unbelievable. Even today, it should be called Chris Claremont's X-Men because he was one of those writers, and every once in a while you come across a writer that just defines character. Like for me, like Frank Miller on Daredevil, he's the one that defined that character. And certainly with Chris Claremont, he was a writer that was just incredible, and a lot of modern day writers still mimic him. Even G.R.R. Martin says that he mimics Claremont's writings when he did the Song of Ice and Fire or Game of Thrones. But what Chris Claremont would do is he would do a lot of foreshadowing. So he would give you a clue in this issue that may not pay off for several issues into the future, or maybe even a years into the future. But so it was just good story writing. Of course, one of his most famous stories was The Dark Phoenix.
Right.
And so that was very adult for comics in the 70s. And so Chris continued on into the 80s. He's still writing. And now the popularity has gone from the 60s to the 70s. Now we're in the 80s. They're even more popular. And in the 80s, X-Men comic was selling over 1 million copies an issue. And so what do you do when you got something that's popular?
You wring the hell out of it.
That's right, and that's what Marvel did. So they come out with X-Factor, they come out with New Mutants, they come out with Wolverine, they come out with Excalibur, all in the 80s. And so if one X-Men comic sells good, then they're going to come out with several more. And so there's a lot of great stories from the 80s, and then that brings us to the 90s is when it comes to the comics. So in the 90s, so you had 60s here, 70s here, 80s here. Here's your 90s as far as the X-Men. It was the biggest IP out there. So it had TV show, which we're going to talk about here in a moment. It had video games. It had fast food tie-ins. There were books. There were movies in development. And they started coming out with even more X-Men comics. They come out with Cable, Deadpool, X-Force, X-Men Unlimited. And so that was really the height, in my opinion, of the X-Men. This comic here, drawn by Jim Lee, it is they rebooted the X-Men back to #1, and they come out with that comic, and it sold more comics than any comic in history, and still holds that record today.
Well, I mean, okay, I even feel for the gimmick for that comic book because you could buy four different #1s with different covers that connected to make a bigger picture.
Right.
Or you could buy the one that trifolds.
It wasn't the first
quadfolds.
variant cover, but it certainly dipped his toe into it. But it sold over 3 million copies of it. But also during that time, the X-Men animated show come out, and the X-Men animated show was incredibly done. In fact, if anybody was going to start collecting X-Men comics, the first thing I would do is send them to that 1990s
When did this
animation
one come
cartoon.
out? That's
That
what
come
I
out
was looking at.
about 2 years earlier.
Okay.
About 2 years earlier.
So
And so you want to talk about it?
So this is my first X-Men cartoon. It's on VHS. And the reason I wanted to say Wolverine was from Australia is because in this one they gave him an Australian accent.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
I
and
thought that was crazy.
it was irritating
yeah.
to anybody that knew the comic.
character,
Yeah.
right? Knew him as the
And
Knucklehead.
how could they get that wrong?
Right.
But the X-Men animated series, first of all, the guy that, and I can't remember his name, but the guy that come up with the theme should get a Grammy for that. Yeah, I mean, once that's in your head, it ain't never coming
Right.
out. And but the cartoon, it like the voice acting was top notch. They had a guy called Cal Dodd who did Wolverine.
Right.
Even to this day,
Yeah.
you know, 34 years later, when I
pick on somebody smaller than you? Well, I'm smaller than you.
yeah, even today, that's pretty good imitation. Even
Yeah,
today,
thanks.
when I'm reading something with X-Men in it or Wolverine in it, that's the voice I hear, and the comic tackled some adult themes in the very first or second episode. They had a character die, Morph.
Yeah.
Beast gets locked up and he's in jail for the first entire season, and it was just they had a love triangle going on between Wolverine and Jean Grey and Cyclops, and they hit a lot of the major storylines that were in the comics.
Right.
So it can really get you caught up to the 90s in the comics by doing that. It had the Mutant Massacre, Days of Future Past, the Phoenix Saga, the Phalanx Covenant. So all these major events that had happened in X-Men, those stories were in animated form. And I mean, and we ate it up. We ate it up. It lasted 5 seasons.
Was Jubilee created for the cartoon, or was she part of the comic books?
She was part of the comics.
Okay.
But in the Pride of the X-Men, and this is an actual VHS.
Right. Yeah.
The Pride of the X-Men, which I think is available on YouTube, but you kind of got to know the team through Kitty Pryde,
Right.
which I think is called Shadow Cat at the time. But anyway, you got to know the team through a young girl named Kitty Pryde. In the animated series, you got to know the team through Jubilee. And so that was kind of your entrance into those characters. So that show finally got canceled. And so that brings us to the 2000s, and the movies started. And but as far as the comics in the 2000s, I'd kind of bailed after this run of X-Men, so I kind of bailed out by the 1990s. Within 2000s, they had Mark Millar. Can you say that?
Mark Millar.
Yeah, that's right, Mark Millar. well,
Mark.
they come out with the Ultimate Universe. Ultimate Spider-Man was real popular, but they had the Ultimate X-Men too. Mark Millar did that. A lot of people read it. I didn't. They said they liked it. Grant Morrison come out. He's a famous writer of comics, and he come out with all new X-Men. A lot of people read that and liked it. Josh Whedon, who is known for the writer of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Buffy the Vampire Slayer. He actually had his own run of comics called Astonishing X-Men. Didn't read that either. Like I said, I'd already bailed in the 90s. And but the movies had came out, and I really, really enjoyed them. Of course, the very first one, you know, Marvel had run into some problems financially.
Right.
So they had sold the movie rights to several of their characters and teams for a short amount of time. Spider-Man was gone. Blade was gone. That's the reason we got those movies. Well, just so happened 20th Century Fox landed the X-Men. First X-Men come out. I mean, it was sweet. I mean, I really, really enjoyed it.
Yeah,
They tried to take, you know, they didn't have the colorful uniforms that they did in the comics, but they tried to take that fantastical characters and bring them over to the real world. So they had leather outfits on, and
They could not have cast a better person for Professor Xavier.
Well, that's the thing, you know, people were clamoring for Patrick Stewart to be Professor X before the X-Men movie even came about. And and then getting him to play Professor X, and then Sir Ian McClellan to play Magneto. You got these two older classical actors, you know, that are taking this dialogue, which, let's be honest, comic book dialogue isn't Shakespeare or anything like that. I enjoy it, and you enjoy it. It's
Right.
entertaining. But the fact is, they took this fantastical dialogue and made it just heart-wrenchingly realistic.
Right.
And so it takes an actor of this type of skill to do that. And so you finally get to see Hugh Jackman for the first time as Wolverine.
Yeah. I wasn't expecting him to pull it off as well as he did, to be honest.
He caught so much flack for that, and now in 2024 they don't want anybody else to play Wolverine.
But see, our Wolverine is from the comic books. He was like 4 foot nothing.
Right. So I really thought they did a great job with that first movie. And then the second one come out, and it was called X-Men United. And I thought they upped the game. I actually thought the second movie, the sequel to X-Men, was better. And so it was so well written and fantastic. And you get to see the good guys join the bad guys in the second movie. And that's always fun. And so then the third one come out, which was called X-Men Last Stand. And so in this one, I like the concept of that. There was supposed to be a cure for the mutant gene.
Right.
So if you had mutated powers and it affected your relationships or affected your appearance, you could take this shot, and then you wouldn't have mutant powers anymore. You'd be just normal. And so I like that concept. Now, they killed Professor X in the third one. Spoiler alert. And they brought him back in the most stupid way. And a lot of people that watched the movie still don't understand how they brought him back. Do you know how they brought him back?
I can't recall, man.
Well, in the movie, he says, I wonder if somebody's consciousness could get transferred over to somebody else. And then at the end of the movie, he apparently had a twin who was in a bed. If you watch the cutscene at the very end of the credits, he had a twin that was in a bed that looked exactly like him, that was brain dead, and he transferred his consciousness into him. That's stupid. I like comic books, and I know they're all fantastical.
Right.
But the thing is, that was just stupid. That was stupid writing. They'd been better off killing another character or leaving Professor X dead.
But it's believable that somebody could shoot lasers from the eyes or have.
No, it's not believable. But yeah, I guess there's a line I'm not willing to cross, and a brain dead twin that I transfer my consciousness into. I guess that's where the line is for me.
Dude, if I pass, that means I get to pass on my shit to you, right?
I'm not brain dead yet, but I'm working on it. So from there, they decided they wanted to try to reboot the X-Men. So they went and did a prequel. And so they got Michael Fassbender, great actor, I like him, and Jennifer Lawrence, which is a Kentucky actress, and we're
Right.
from Kentucky, so
Beautiful
I like her.
young lady.
And then who was the dude that played Professor X? What's his name? John McAvoy? Yeah. So they got him to play Professor X. All top-notch actors. But X-Men First Class, I just didn't really care for it. For me, it wasn't the old group that I was accustomed to. And they took continuity and they just tore it up and dug a hole and put it in there and pooped on it and then covered that hole with dirt. I mean, they just totally ignored continuity. And
Continuity
First
to
Class.
the comic books?
No, into the movies.
Well,
All if
so
you
don't
try
even
to
think it was continuity.
if you try to keep up with continuity and the X-Men, the 20th Century Fox X-Men movies,
Right.
they'll drive you crazy. I mean, Wolverine have metal claws one time, they don't have bone claws the next, and they'll have metal claws again, and you don't know how you got the metal back in there. It's terrible. But anyway, so X-Men First Class didn't care for it, and they come out with X-Men Days of Future Past, and it's up there behind Morty. But I really liked that movie. First of all, if you get the Rogue cut, because in the theatrical release they cut out a lot of the character Rogue, and it adds so much more to the story. Plus, she's one of the original characters, so I like that. So but the thing is that it brought back the old group along with the new group. So it brought back Patrick Stewart and James McAvoy and Michael Fassbender and Sir Ian McClellan. It brought them all in together in this time-spanning adventure, and which was based on a real popular comic book story by the same name, Days of Future Past.
But they still had the same girl playing Rogue or not Rogue, but Mystique.
Yes, they still had her. So it had the old cast and the new cast, and it had a good send off for the old casts. They did well. It kind of was like a happily ever after story when it got to the end, and all the timelines had been fixed and all that stuff. And so it was very satisfying for me to see that end for those old characters. But they had to keep making them. So they made X-Men Apocalypse, which I watched. It's very forgettable. I'm not going to talk about it
I don't even know that I've watched that.
I forgot it. They come out with X-Men Dark Phoenix, another retelling of the Dark Phoenix story with the chick from Game of Thrones, redhead. I forget her name.
Yeah.
And so they had her in it. That was horrible. And that's when they
But
said,
even
you know what?
in the comic books, they had brought back Jean Grey so many times. There was one time she actually came back and said, "Stop! Y'all need to stop.
Stop bringing me
Yeah,
back.
stop bringing me back."
But so that kind of ended the movies. They come out with a New Mutants movie, which I never saw. I don't think anybody did. But basically, right around that time, the X-Men, from 60s to 70s to 80s to 90s, all of a sudden they started their decline. The comics started a huge decline. Some people have accused Marvel of, since they didn't own the X-Men, and these X-Men movies were making money, that they purposely put bad writers and bad artists on the title to drive down the popularity of X-Men, because Marvel doesn't make much money on comics anymore. They make most of their money on merchandise and movies and things like that. And so since somebody else, 20th Century Fox, owned X-Men, why should we try to keep this fire lit for them? They're actually drawing from our stories to make their movies. So why don't we just produce a crap product and try to drag down their movies? That's what they've been accused of. I don't know if it's true or not, but regardless of that, the X-Men's been in horrible shape. It's been in terrible shape. I mean, some of the stories they've come up with, I haven't read them, but I go to YouTube channels like Open by Chance or, no, not Open by Chance, Thinking Critical, and Near Mint Condition, and I hear them talk about the new runs of X-Men, and I mean, it just sounds like a dumpster fire. And so I don't think I think I've saved money and saved time by not watching new X-Men. But Marvel has recently got back the rights from 20th Century Fox to make their own X-Men movies.
Cool.
Of course, the first one they come out with, which really is an X-Men movie, was Deadpool Wolverine.
Right.
And so they made a ton of money off that. So they're really wanting to reboot the X-Men and start with their own team again. And they're rebooting the comics as well. So it could be that the new comics have good quality.
You mean now they're going to put forth an effort?
Could be. It's possible. Not going to guarantee. And but it'd be interesting. What do you think they should do as far as going forward? If all of a sudden you had this property, and all this had been done to it already, and you were going to try to go forward with new movies, how would you handle the X-Men?
Well, that's kind of hard because, I mean, everybody wants to start over and start from scratch and start from the beginning. But like you said, it's already been done, it's already been seen, but you can't go back. You might be able to pick up some of them old characters and stuff like that. So I don't know. I don't know how I would go forward. I don't know if I would start all over again, if I would start doing like they did with the Avengers. I mean, the X-Men came about due to the Avengers in the comic books. Maybe they should do that with that, since it's the MCU, and start just giving each one of these characters their own story and then bring them together in the end.
I think they're going to try to reboot with new characters because you just simply can't use Patrick Stewart and Famke Janssen who played Jean Grey, because they're way, Patrick's in his 80s and their 70s, And so they're going to have to reboot it with new characters. Now, whether it'll be popular or not, I don't know. I do suggest that, and Marvel always listens to us anytime we make a
Sure,
suggestion. But I do suggest that they keep the X-Men in a separate universe. I think by trying to put the X-Men in there with the Avengers, you run into this problem. Number one, if if people get mutant powers when they reach a certain age, has that not happened until just now? Or has that been happening and it's been hidden because it's not been addressed in any of the Avenger movies?
Well, I mean, even in the comic books and in the cartoons, one of the big things was mutants did stay hidden. It was their, that was kind of like their thing. I don't need to come basically out of the closet.
Yeah.
People don't need to know I'm a mutant.
Well, people, even in the comics, they kept the X-Men stuff over here and the superhero stuff over
Right.
here. And on occasion, like in X-Men versus Wolverine, X-Men versus Avengers, there was a crossover. But for the most part, they had their own little areas and they stayed in it. But they were aware of each other. But I think it might be a good idea just to have a separate universe where you have just tell the mutant stories there. But do you go back and tell the Dark Phoenix story that's already been told twice in live action and once in the animated? They did a fantastic job, a better job than any of the movies in the animated version.
Right.
So
My question is how many times have they retold Peter Parker's story?
yes, and that, I ran into a buddy of mine at the comic book store years ago, and he said, I'm done with comics. And he was probably about 50 at the time. His name was Jody Smith. And we went to first and second and third grade together. And I said, how come? He said, I'm tired of reading the same origin story.
Right.
And it's where they reboot comics every so many years, and they just go back and tell that origin story. Well, he was a Spider-Man fan and a few other characters. Well, he was just tired of reading that same origin story, And so that's the conundrum Marvel has, 20th Century Fox done a decent job with those movies. I still think they hold up, the first three especially. And I still go back and rewatch them from time to time and enjoy them. So it would be difficult. It'd be difficult to just totally ignore that and start over. And but they don't really have much of a choice. We didn't purposely talk about the Deadpool movies, or we purposely didn't talk about the standalone Wolverine movies, even though that's part of the X-Men universe, simply for time's sake and because at some point you may want to talk about Wolverine or you may want to talk about Deadpool. But so now that Marvel, I give Disney, now Marvel's owned by Disney, I give Disney a lot of crap on a lot of things. And they deserve crap on a lot of things. But at the same time, sometimes they get things right. Like the Andor series, which you haven't watched.
Right.
Which I'll lend to you today. And but they decided to come out with X-Men 97. And so X-Men 97 is where they went back to that old 1990s animated show. And they tried to animate it like the old 1990s show. And they brought back a lot of the voice actors from the 1990s show. And they called it X-Men 97 because that's when the old show ended.
Right.
So they tried to have the new show pick up right where the old show ended. So it was very ambitious. Nobody really had any hope for it that Disney was going to get this right, but they got it right, in my opinion. You just recently watched these.
I just recently watched.
So
actually, in the last 2 days is the first time I'd ever laid eyes on.
So
I watched the whole first season.
So I've been talking too much. You tell me.
The very first thing irritated the hell out of me. They had cut Bishop's beautiful locks of hair off.
His mullet.
Him and Rick James. You go shave Rick James's head and you get the same freaking reaction. But anyway, I digress. Other than that, yeah, I was super happy with it. And as an old school geek, I did realize that they were hitting certain storylines that were in the comic books.
Yes.
Just like they did in the original.
Yes.
I could tell a subtle difference in the animation.
Yes.
It was better.
Yes.
It was better,
But it was close.
it was still like true to the original.
Right.
But you could tell things were shaded a little better. It was a little more,
They still have the
Beat. Oh yeah.
They
Well,
still,
see, even about the opening, what I liked about this new opening was they would show you glimpses of things from the past, things
Yes.
that were coming up, just real quick, enough to where I was literally pausing it, going back to see like, oh, what the hell did I just miss? Oh, I remember that. Wonder if they're going to show this, and then they would show things that it wouldn't even be in the series, but it'd be cool to see inside that little snippet thing.
Yeah,
Another thing that I enjoyed it was, and I didn't understand it, was Morph. At first, I was kind of thrown off because, like you said, he was killed in the comic books and stuff.
yes, yeah, he was killed in the
Killed in the
series,
series.
but he did come back in this old series.
So, but the Morph I knew, like you said, had black hair. It was combed
Yeah,
over to one
yeah,
side.
yeah.
This Morph was all a white-faced alien looking
Yes.
thing. But I liked his character because with this character, you could show him as other characters. Like there was one time he morphed into the Hulk.
Right.
There was another time he morphed into different characters, and it made me think. Okay, so you morphed into the Hulk. Do you have the power of the Hulk? But anyway, yeah, it was really well written. It was good beat to it. I didn't get. There was times I was like, "Oh,
What'd you think about the death scene? Did
dude,
you think that was good?
Which one? Like when?
Gambit.
Okay, so yeah, that was like,
Spoilers.
yeah, spoilers. Yeah, I was trying to do a spoiler free, but Vince
Yeah.
he doesn't open his
Farted on
bearded
that.
face. Yeah, dude, I was like,
Yeah, that
no
was good.
effing way.
That was good, but it was done well.
Yeah, it was done well. It was touching.
I
And
love
it was,
a heroic death.
and I thought they had done the same with Magneto when Wolverine
Yes.
skewered him, and and he was like,
Spoilers.
yeah, he was like, "You're not the first one." And I'm like, "Holy shit, man! They're just gonna be whacking off people left and right."
Yeah.
So yeah, the whole thing just was highs and lows. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. I can't really say anything too negative about it.
No. I mean, it was.
I think I think at times it felt like they were trying to cover too many stories at once.
I thought it was perfect. I thought it was fantastic. I didn't have anything negative to say about it. Bravo! I'll give you a slow clap, Disney. You nailed it on that one. Now the guy that wrote it was Bo DeMayo, and they fired him right before the show aired. He'd already finished season 1, and was had started writing on season 2. And so for them to do that, which is kind of bad publicity, right before it airs,
Right.
you know he had to do something bad. People didn't know what he'd done. He's a black gay guy, and they didn't know what he'd done. The fact that he's a person of color and homosexual, and that Disney fired him, you're thinking, what in the world did he do?
Yeah, you think he would be like a poster boy?
Yeah, I mean, think he'd be have plot armor. So I mean, but the thing is like, yeah, so he had
So is that why they?
no, there was he had an OnlyFans page, so people speculated he was doing something on there.
Is he the one that was sending pics to his fellow employees?
Yes. So he
yeah,
was.
yeah,
It
yeah.
come out. He was sending. It come out that he was sending nude pictures to male employees, and so yeah,
You
HR
know-
has a problem with that.
That takes some real.
Yeah, HR. That's kind of like
That takes
chapter.
a lot of testosterone.
That takes
for a
chapter
person that's
1
not-
HR is don't send nude photos to employees. I mean, and they didn't even ask for
So
the
first
nude
they
photos.
were like,
Yeah. So I mean,
and he didn't stop.
No, they warned him, and he kept it up because he was really enjoying himself. But the fact is, regardless of the man's habits,
Have it. Well,
personal choices,
right.
man, he can write a good X-Men story.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and I mean,
But I mean, did he
and-
write a good story? Was he able to take good stories like these? I brought these comic books for just because, Rogue turning evil.
yes,
That's from the comic books.
yes,
The whole Forge and Storm thing.
Yeah,
Even
yeah.
went. The title of the cartoon was the same as the comic
Yes,
book, Life
yes.
and Death.
yeah.
A love story, dude. It's like straight from the comic.
Yes,
books.
but there's a skill being able to take something written in one form, like comic book form, and then switch it over to animated form or live action. There's a skill in that. An example would be like David and David from the two guys that worked on Game of Thrones.
Mm-hmm.
They had a skill taking a book this big and condensing it down to a 10 1-hour episodes. But when it come to the very end of the season, when he hadn't written that book yet, and he just said, well, this is going to happen, blah, 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 those guys couldn't take this much information and expand it to 10-hour one episodes. And they failed. And so there is a skill there, and Bo DeMayo really, and he did throw in some original stuff. But the thing is, he's got real skill there. It's a shame they got rid of him. I understand why they did. Maybe they could have just slapped his hand and told him to stop. I don't know. I guess there's a line there where if he's bothering other employees, you have to get rid of him.
Well, I mean,
but the thing is, he did write some of the second season, and they won an Emmy for that first season, and he wasn't allowed to come to the Emmy show or anything like that. So it's a shame it worked out that way. But the man's got some problems, but we all do. But the man's got some talent too, and so
he's got some cojones to
yeah.
pull off that shit too.
Yeah, right.
He probably was
Yeah.
showing how big his cojones.
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah,
Look at the size
somebody's
of
got
my
a
cojones.
picture of him. So as far as merchandise, so years ago, I don't typically collect Marvel Legend figures, but I did get the X-Men figures, which are behind me. I'm not X-Men, Daredevil figures, which are behind me, and I love the animated show so much that I try to get each one of the characters from the animated show, which you had Professor X, and you had Beast, and Gambit, and Rogue, and Cyclops, and Wolverine, and Marvel Girl, and Jubilee, and Storm. So I collected all those, and a lot of them I bought, they were loose, because I was going to display them anyway,
Right.
so I didn't care if they were in a package. As soon as I got them all collected, finally got the last one, which I think was
They
Professor
come
X.
out with a complete collector set.
They
or
come out
something?
with the animated version. So they're shaded. They call it cell shading, C-E-L.
So where they have like the black lines.
Yeah,
and
so
stuff
it makes them look, a lot of times it's the same molds, but it's to make them look like more like the animated
Right.
show. And plus they come in really cool containers that look like little VHS boxes.
Ah.
And so then you can display all the boxes together and got a picture. If I didn't have these, I would have bought them. But the thing is, I'm not buying them again. And to be honest with you, I like the fact these are more realistic.
Right.
If you can call Wolverine ever realistic.
Actually, that's like a really good Jubilee. So there's certain characters that I look for in figures that is not really done well. Like, I've never seen a really good Robin figure. Maybe one or two. And I've never seen a really well done Jubilee figure. And that's a pretty damn good figure.
Yeah, I mean, the glasses come off and on, the bubble gum comes out. And and she's got some sparklies I think you can attach to the hands, but they're around here
Yeah,
somewhere.
see, that's always what kept me from being a Jubilee fan. Like,
Yeah.
the fireworks, that's it, that's your thing.
Well, I mean, that's what made the character interesting. She didn't have much to work on. Now, as she got older,
Which showed in the new cartoon.
yes, her little fireworks out of her fingertips were more powerful.
Right.
And but yeah, I like that character. I like that character. It was like I said, the Kitty Pryde character, the kind of character that introduces you to that world.
Right. And I think it's because of the age.
Yeah. So do
Yeah.
you got any kind of collectibles you want to
Dude,
show off?
like all of these, I had,
That's Toy Biz.
this is Toy Biz. These are what, 10-inch?
Yeah, I'd say yeah.
Yeah. This is pretty much what I got left. I had like a Spider-Man, a Venom.
Yeah, you sold those.
No, I either sold them or gave them away.
Yeah.
But yeah, these are the ones from X-Men. I actually have 3 more Wolverines. I didn't bring those.
Just in case you lose two, you still got
Well, no,
one.
I have one from Weapon X.
Oh, I got
and
you.
I have one from him in the military. But when we were talking X-Men, I still have the Wolverine in this version. I can't remember.
Secret Wars.
Yeah, from the Secret
Yeah.
Wars.
Yeah.
I had a whole set of these die-cast,
Yeah.
little bitty die-cast people here. And I actually gave those away. We were doing a con.
Yes.
And I would ask the kids trivia questions, and if they got it right, I'd give them a gift. And half the time,
You're so nice.
Well, I mean, it was a way to meet the fans. It was a way to
Yeah.
get people to the booth.
Yeah.
And it was something that I had collected
Yeah.
with us.
Yeah.
I bought this I don't know if you can see that.
Yeah, you better bring it over just in case. I don't know how far
So
the camera shows.
This is an X-Men toy, but the reason I had bought this one, and I bought this when it came out, because this was the very first Wolverine figure ever made.
Yeah.
And they made this super size.
Yeah.
They even had a
15 inches.
super size play sets that went with this. Can you imagine
yeah.
how big the play sets were that went with
Yeah.
these things?
Yeah.
So, and he's never been out of the box, never had it open.
Yeah. Cool.
And then the only other X-Men toy that I'm proud of, I have a ton of them laying over there. I'm not going to show you them all. We can probably give you some B-roll or something of it. But this is the first Deadpool. This is X-Men X-Force. But this is the first Deadpool figure ever made.
Yes, and it looks good too. You got it in good shape.
Well,
A lot of times, sunlight and moisture is what's bad on.
Right.
And a lot of times, people that have their figures in the sunlight, this plastic will
Gets it
turn
yellow.
Yellow, yeah.
Yeah.
And the thing is, retro figures are real popular now.
Right.
So they'll take a figure like this, and they'll put it on a card like this, and they'll sell it for, $25, $30.
Right.
When you can go back and buy one, sometimes, maybe not this
Right.
figure, but you can go back and actually buy a retro figure
For cheaper.
for cheaper.
Right.
So why would you buy a new one when you can get an old one?
Upsets me because, y'all can't see, but it's sitting over here. I've probably got about 8 more figures just lined up in boxes. And just freaking, just tons of them. And I'm sitting here thinking, I've never pulled these out. I've never played with them. I've always kept them in the box.
Yeah.
And then they reprint them and make other ones of them.
Yeah,
and
but you didn't get it. You didn't get them.
But yeah, but if this is only worth $5 or $6 now,
Yeah.
I don't know how much that is worth now.
I'd say about $10.
Why didn't I pull it out and play with the kid? Because if I got to pay $25 just to buy one that I can play with,
Yeah, but you didn't keep it in there.
I bought it as
You were at the age where you enjoyed it just as much in the package.
I did, and I still do,
as out
and
of the
it will
package.
hang on
Right.
the wall one day. But
Yeah.
what good is it saving it if it never went up
Yeah,
in value?
I bought these out of the package because I was just going to stick them on a shelf and pose them.
Right.
But
Oh, these things came in massive boxes.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So you done, brother? All right, man. I appreciate you tuning in. If you like our content, please like and subscribe. And I'm done. You done?
I'm done.
All right, we're done.
I'm done.
We're done.
We're done.
We're done. We are done.
Done. Done. Done. Done. Done. Done. Done. Done. Done.
Oh, you'll cut that out, so.
Dun 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 dun.